is Hannah Spiro, and I'm the rabbi of Hill Clavera. And I am so grateful to be with you all to celebrate the life of our beloved Susan Cohen of blessed memory. Together, today, we have the opportunity to celebrate a truly unique person who brought incredible depth, passion, creativity, and love to every day of her life. Before we get started, a couple of notes. There are exits, not just here, but also back here. In the unlikely event of an evacuation, our meeting place is always in front of Grubb's Pharmacy on 4th and East Capitol. And I hope that as you came in, you got a program, as well as a piece of paper and pen. The instructions on the pieces of paper are clear and up the front. We will be hearing from a number of people over the course of this afternoon who knew Susan in so many different capacities and who came to know so many different gifts that she brought to the world over the course of her very beautiful life. So let's prepare to celebrate that life together, beginning with a call to attention and mindfulness, one that Susan brought to our Jewish congregation, Hill Clavera, every year for the high holidays, the call of the shofar. And I'd like to invite up Maccabee Epstein, one of our younger shofar blowers, who's followed in Susan's footsteps, as we hear the shofar blast not once, but twice. Susan was a deeply multifaceted person. And like I said, you all knew her from many different places and stages of life. But I knew her largely as a Jewish community builder. Wait, Maccabee's here. Okay, we're gonna do this first. Speaking of being a Jewish community builder, I think blowing the shofar was maybe the most visible way she did this, but not the only way she did that. So, you're gonna have Maccabee. Oh, he was being really helpful. He's grabbing Kleenex. Thank you, Maccabee. Come on up. Yeah, I should have coughed. With that, so 8 years ago, when I came to the neighborhood to serve as Hill Clavera's first rabbi, I was joining an already bustling, active community that Susan and Sig created together. Nearly 20 years prior to my arrival, they had walked the streets of Capitol Hill searching for mezuzot on doorposts. Maybe some of your homes were among the ones they found, and leaving notes for their yet unknown Jewish neighbors to join them for Shabbat dinner. Shabbat dinners turned into Shabbat services, and then the community grew and developed more and more, all inspired by Susan and Sig's guiding principles of welcome, inclusion, authenticity, and community service. Susan was very blunt with me. She was honest. She wanted the Jewish community to be about connection, understanding, and mutual support, not just going through the motions of tradition. She challenged me to be a better rabbi, and I am so grateful for it. Her clarity about what she wanted to see in Jewish ritual and community building had a deep impact in the way I lead services to this day. And it also had a very practical implication that we are all experiencing right now, in that she came to my office a few years ago with this manila folder with her name written on it in cursive on the side, that she wanted me to file away for when she eventually died. She wanted to make sure that I knew that she did not want a traditional Jewish funeral with Hebrew liturgy at its backbone. She wanted a celebration of life crafted in the way that she knew she and her diverse community would be able to understand outright and find approachable and meaningful. She brought me the words to a song that we sometimes sing at services that she wanted us to sing to remember her, which we'll do at the end. And she brought me a poem that Sig wrote for her years ago that she wanted to be read. Sig is shaking his head right now, and he is too humble to read it, but she specifically asked me for it, and it would be really messed up if I didn't do it. She told me to. I only have it in hard copy. She brought it to me in this folder, so I have the honor of reading it to you now. What do you say? What? Oh, you are? Oh, okay, so Sig is going to read it as per Susan's request. So I'll invite you up in just a minute to do that. We'll hear more from Sig later, but yeah, she was very clear about what she wanted. Like I said, she was a blunt person. She was honest, and she provided like incredibly usable and important critique in my work. She was also full of love and gentleness and care. Susan told me that I had bad posture at the Dora table and looked funny. But then she like took me to her office and she worked on my legs and she bought me orthotics. Like she really cared. She gave my little ones candy and bracelets and showed them so much love. Actually, Sig had me bring my 2-year-old when I came to visit a couple times during the last year of Susan's life, and it was a gift for me and also for my 2-year-old, who got to spend some really beautiful time with an incredibly generous and one-of-a-kind soul. So, Sig, so grateful for your willingness to come on up. Really just to fulfill Susan's very clear and not subjective wish to read his words written years ago for Susan.
This is John. I wrote this, I don't know how many years ago, so bear with me. Your journey began in Borough Park in a different era, in a different time. The apple of your parents' eye, a baby girl, a child so fine. On 44th near the Avenue, you became a special Gothamite, but at New Utrecht High and Brooklyn College, foreign lands were in your sight. Amidst the chaos of the apple, the Big Apple, you looked beyond the River Hudson and the Mississippi to faraway shores, strange sights, exotic food, where elephants roam, truly. Tikis chirp. A tiki is a little, like a chameleon, okay? We have a few Bengali speakers here who would know what that is, okay. We're monsoon. And monsoon rains lurk beyond giant clouds from the hustle bustle of Chowringhee, that's a street in Calcutta, to a small town in Germany, from Dhaka, Chicago, Calcutta, and Bonn to Hamburg, Rockville, and even London. Sorry. You ventured to points far away and nearer still and ended up on Capitol Hill. In all these places far and near, one thing stands out as very clear. With all whom you touched, friendships were launched, not just for now, but lasting and staunch. You bring out the best in all manner of folk. You care, you're there, you're the hub, you're not just spoke. The smile and presence that you radiate leaves us all in a heightened state, and if that weren't enough for you to share, you always make sure our spines are straight. Mary's going to talk about that. Our necks are straight, our shoulders relaxed, our kinesthetic sense remains intact, and our torsos broaden wide and square. For in addition to all the ways you care, you keep us free from wear and tear. And so now you will see from the dozens of letters, notes, and greetings From friends and admirers far and wide, you are truly special in each of our eyes. As well, you are the gleam in your family's eyes, a special mom, grandmom, and friend. Your love and kindness have no end.
You're a good husband. Thank you, Sig. So, we're going to hear from a number of speakers and readers, each of whom knew Susan in some very unique way. And I'm going to let each of them explain their relationship with Susan. But first, I'd like to start with Lori Stolnick, a longtime friend of Susan, a fellow co-creator of this community, who was with her on her last day of life.
Thank you, Rabbi Hannah. So I'm going to share some remarks, but I want you to help me. As I was preparing them, a refrain kept popping into my head. So that's your part. And when I ask why, your part is because she was Susan. So let's rehearse. Why? Because she was Susan. I think you've got it. To Sig, to Eric, to Risa, to Jay, Erica, Kyle, and Luke. What a wonderful way to honor your mother, your grandmother, your wife. She was such an incredible woman. Just look around here. There are people from all walks of her life. Susan always brought people together. Why? Because she was Susan. For those of us who knew them as a couple, Sig and Susan were one unit. But today is about Susan, so I'm honored to share a couple of brief reflections, and I hope you'll share your own with me and with each other when we mingle downstairs after the program. Susan Cohen had already lived many stages of her life by the time I met her in the late 1990s. She'd been a daughter, a student, a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a teacher, an adventurer, and so much more. But there were more chapters still to come. Of course there were. Susan was determined to squeeze in every opportunity that life offered her. Why? Because she was Susan. Susan grew up as the cherished daughter in a teeming Brooklyn neighborhood of first and second generation immigrants. My favorite Susan story from her childhood was when her father, a photographer who had some neighborhood mafia connections, settled a score with a schoolyard bully who had been menacing little Susan in the playground. Susan didn't provide a lot of details, but I understand that that bully's bicycle never looked the same again. Susan told me that she always found her grounding by simply talking to her parents, and that she continued to talk to them long after they were gone. I asked her if they ever answered her, and she thought about it and said, "No, but that's okay. I still talk to them." What a profoundly spiritual practice that is. Susan's spirit now rests with those of her parents and her beloved brother Shelley, who she took such loving care of during his life. But Susan's spirit also rests in the hearts and minds of those of us who she so deeply touched while she was here. And in that way, she lives on. We can even still talk to Susan if we're so moved. She may not answer, but that's okay. Susan and I were more than neighbors. We were more than friends. We were confidants. We were co-conspirators. We had a sisterhood that I cherished deeply, never more so than when I found myself hospitalized many years ago, unexpectedly, and the first face I saw at my bedside was Susan's, which was odd because I wasn't allowed any visitors at that point. So I asked her, how'd you get in here? And She looked around, make sure nobody was looking, and then she whispered, "I told them I was your sister." And I'll never forget the satisfied look on her face. For the next several days, Susan escorted a parade of other sisters into my hospital room until one of the nurses raised an eyebrow and said, "You sure do come from a big family." Actually, I was an only child. But when I was around Susan, I never felt that way. Why? Because she was Susan. Susan achieved a lot in her life, but it's the little things that I'll remember the most. She was an incredibly accomplished hostess, and if you ever had a meal at her table, you know what I'm talking about. Her skills came to her naturally and served her well for decades as a foreign service spouse. So when Susan and I worked on our first ever communal Passover Seder over 2 decades ago, we were looking at a shoestring budget and 63 confirmed RSVPs for a sit-down dinner. This was not a problem for Susan. In one whirlwind trip to Party City, she transformed what was then a dingy church basement into a grand hall fit for a proper state dinner. Why? Because she was Susan. Bonnie, you were with us at that first Party City run, and it was springtime, and we were preparing for a Passover event, but all they had were Easter-themed colors. But Susan managed to pull together something truly, truly appropriate. Susan brightened every room she ever walked into. Yes, even the soup kitchen that we volunteered at together so many years ago. Every Tuesday, we would prepare a hot lunch and we would serve it to the homeless men and women in our area. When Susan staffed the buffet line, she took the time to learn and to respect the preferences and the quirks of some of the clientele, asking after this one's well-being, making sure that that one's vegetables didn't touch his entree. You know, some people have quirks. And in general, ensuring the dignity of all who entered. Why? Because she was Susan. Here's another example of how Susan set a high standard for the care and feeding of everybody she encountered. Each year, our congregation hosts a communal break the fast bagel meal after Yom Kippur. One year, we ran out of lox early on when the first rush of hungry worshipers descended on the buffet line and piled their bagels really high with huge forklifts full of lox, leaving the rest of us to make do with cream cheese. So there was some talk about establishing the lox police for subsequent years, but Susan came up with the perfect solution. Susan organized a cadre of volunteer lox rollers. What is a lox roller? I think the Department of Labor has it now as an official category. She got people to arrive early and to peel each individual thinly sliced section of lox from the package and roll it into a cylinder. And she had us all arrange the cylinders of rolled lox on beds of lettuce, appropriately garnished, so that people could see how much they were taking rather than to take a forklift full. It was a veritable roller derby, and it became a wonderful thing year after year, just people showing up early and rolling the lox. Susan's lox rolling brigade solved our lox hoarding problem with finesse and with class. Why? Because she was Susan. It was an incredible honor to have known and loved Susan Cohen. I was incredibly privileged to sit with her in her last hours, to hold her hand, to stroke her arm, to sing to her, and to simply witness her journey. I slipped out as Risa wrapped loving arms around her mother, and with a breaking heart, whispered to her, "You can let go now." May we all aspire to live as memorably as Susan did, to be loved as universally as Susan was, and to be able to face our next adventure with as much grace and dignity as Susan Cohen had. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Lori. The next person I'd like to invite up is Erica Cohen Rampey, Susan's beloved granddaughter, who had an especially close and caring relationship with her.
I just want to start by saying I'm recovering from a little cold and I'm a crier, so this might get really nasally and just apologies in advance. As some of you may know, I had a special bond with my grandma. I grew up in San Diego, but at a young age, I was in love, borderline obsessed with all things New York City. I also loved singing and performing and wanted to do musical theater. And these were things that really brought my grandma and I closer together. In high school, I went to visit my grandparents in DC, and my grandma planned a special day trip to New York City. It was my first time ever going, and it was absolutely amazing. And after that, I was hooked. I did not apply myself in high school, but I was determined to find a way to move to the city. So when I figured things out and I made a plan to go to college and move across the country, it felt so amazing to have her in my corner, cheering me on. Sorry. She was so supportive of all my dreams, and I feel so fortunate to have had someone like her in my life, because she really opened up my world and showed me, new things and new experiences. Every time I came to DC, my grandma would take me to different plays and movies and museums. My grandparents are really the coolest. They always knew about the latest shows, and they were always trying new restaurants, and it was really admirable to see them so involved in their community. I always joked with my grandma how I would need to schedule a nap during my visits just so I could keep up with her. I feel incredibly grateful that my grandma gave me these experiences, and it really has shaped me into the person I am today. I truly love having my grandparents close by. I have so many amazing memories with them, especially visiting over the Thanksgiving holiday. It was always fun. I got to meet a lot of interesting people. All their friends were so amazing. It would be a night full of good food, laughter, and interesting conversations. This past Thanksgiving, it was a hard one. I wasn't ready to say goodbye to my grandma. I knew I would cry, because obviously I'm a crier. And I wanted to be strong for her in that moment. And all I could tell her was that I loved her and talk about anything else than what was happening. So I figured that I'd close with what I wish I would have said to her that last time, which was just, thank you. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for opening up my world and helping me shape who I am today. I appreciate everything that you've done, and I'll remember everything. And I love you. Sorry.
Well, thank you so much, Erica. I'd like to now invite up Fran Smalley, who met Susan in Bonn, Germany in 1972. They've been close friends ever since.
I've never used one of these before. Over 52 years ago, in a synagogue in Bonn, Germany, I met my dearest friend. She was gregarious, confident, and a force of nature. Me, maybe not so much. All the same, we connected, and as time passed, our friendship grew. We shared stories of our lives. She would have me in stitches as well as tears, describing growing up in Brooklyn with her parents and brother Sheldon. Life wasn't always easy, but from it emerged a very strong and impressive woman. It was impossible to hide that my then marriage was a failure, and Sue was not only my strongest support emotionally, but instrumental in helping me leave with my 2-year-old daughter, Amy. She even said she would try to get my precious LPs, books, and Amy's favorite toys. My phone is up, here we go. Of course, I assured her that nothing was worth her putting herself in danger. But as always, in her mind, the risk was worth the reward. My parents had a volatile marriage, so I hadn't ever experienced anything that wasn't on the verge of explosion. The time I spent with Sue and Sig opened my eyes to what a loving relationship could be and helped me realize that a happy, peaceful life was feasible, and that disagreements could be handled with tact and respect. While I was still in Bonn, we would speak almost daily and then get together with our children. One evening, Amy not wanting to stop playing, refused to put her jacket on. I tried to explain calmly the importance of keeping warm, but she continued to protest. Sue, having a bit more experience as a mom and not willing to take her nonsense, took the jacket, got her dressed, put her in the car seat, and told her that Mommy would now explain. From parenting to relationships, Sue taught me by example and sometimes with a firm but loving nudge. In spite of our geographic distances, we remained close. I eventually remarried and introduced Lee to Sue and Sig. The four of us traveled to many fascinating parts of the world for many years. Not long ago, Sue and I reminisced about our trip to New Orleans and going to the Buttermilk Drop Bakery owned by Dwight Henry, the star of the movie Beasts of the Southern Wild, a wonderful, fantastical story taking place after Hurricane Katrina. It was a chance to meet this gifted actor and talented baker and to purchase a dozen of the sweetest, gooeyest donuts. Sweet treats were one of Sue's greatest joys. One summer, Lee and Sig decided to hike some of the national parks out west. So Sue and I planned our own adventure to Guatemala. Unbeknownst to us, it was quite dangerous, and the bus was followed by police during the entire trip. Near the end of our journey, a volcano erupted. Flights were canceled, guides went home, and we were left to our own devices. In the midst of the chaos, Sue thought a cab ride around Guatemala City and lunch in another neighborhood would be fun. Our hotel caught wind of our plan and had a car follow us until we returned. Sue took it all in stride. Having lived in Bangladesh and India, this was just another third world experience for her. Sue had always something going on, but I think that until she discovered the Alexander technique, she hadn't really found her calling. She loved the learning process, and even after completing the course in London, she took workshops all over the world, including in New York City. When there, she would stay with us, and although it might only be a late snack or a rush cup of coffee with Cool Whip, We would enjoy the brief time together and sometimes even squeeze in a show, which was another of her passions. When my mom died, Sue came up to be with me. For some distraction, she brought a collection of what was needed to make jewelry. We stayed up all night creating necklaces and earrings, only to take everything apart in the morning, realizing how much we still had to learn. But what really mattered was that we were together during that very difficult time for me. 5 years ago, Jay, who lived in New York, found Sue, his birth mother. It was all exciting and a bit scary for Sue. So it was decided that they would meet at our place. It was so gratifying to be there at the beginning of their newfound relationship. Her wish for us to come together, celebrate with her favorite music, stories, and our memories was quintessential Susan. I will forever remember her positive approach to life. There are endless tales about our travels and visits, and I cherish them all. She won't be straightening my head and Alexandering me anymore, but when I think of Sue, I stand a bit taller, and I'm so very grateful to have had her in my life all these years. I love you, miss you, and will never forget you.
Thank you so much, Graham. I'd like to now invite up Luke LeMay and Kyle Cohen, Susan and Sig's grandchildren, to read a poem by Judy Chicago entitled The Merger Poem, which you can find in the program.
And then all that has divided us will merge.
And softness will come to a world that is harsh and unkind.
And then both women and men will be strong.
And then all will be rich and free and varied.
And then all will share equally the earth's abundance.
And then all will nourish the young.
And then everywhere will be called Eden.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Now I'd like to invite up Susan's daughter-in-law, Nancy Ziegler Cohen, loving wife of Susan's son, Eric. Nancy, welcome.
Hi, my name is Nancy. I'm Susan's daughter-in-law. I'm a little bit of a crybaby too, so I try to keep mine light. I've had the pleasure of knowing Sig and Susan for the past 9 years, and Susan and I hit it off from the very beginning. I loved her curiosity, her sense of adventure, her quick-witted humor, and her ability to be a chameleon. She spoke to complete strangers wherever we went, and she liked to break rules every now and then. She taught my husband that well. She always expressed a genuine interest in our lives. Every time we traveled, she'd ask for daily pictures, and if I forgot to send them, she would give me a gentle reminder. One of my first experiences with Susan was a planned visit to San Diego shortly after Eric and I got married. I really wanted to impress my new in-laws with a great trip and lots of plans. I tried getting tickets to the La Jolla Playhouse. I knew Susan would love that, but I couldn't. They only had 2 horrible seats left. The next day I spoke to her on the phone and she sensed my frustration. The next day, we received an email with an entire agenda of things to do in San Diego, including going up to Tijuana. Like I said, she was adventurous. But at the end, there was a PS, I got tickets to the La Jolla Playhouse. So on that Sunday, which was Girls' Day, just the two of us, I asked her where she'd like to eat or what she had a taste for. Mind you, this is a really nice part of town in San Diego, some of the most expensive real estate. Tiger Woods plays golf right across the street, Torrey Pines golf course. And she said, chicken wings. I told her in that part of town, I don't think restaurants had chicken wings on the menu. And unfortunately, the only place with really good chicken wings was a couple of miles down the road at a dive bar. And she said, even better, let's go. So this is what I mean by being a chameleon. She was comfortable from a dive bar to a bougie playhouse. So we get to the playhouse only to find out that it was a full house. And we were headed to our first seat, which was the nosebleed section. Susan told me to leave my phone on, which I thought you weren't supposed to do when you were watching a play, and she would be back. But I don't know why she would be back, because she was supposed to sit in her seat. So I left my phone on, and a few minutes later, right before lights were supposed to dim, I get a text from her, and it says, look down. So I look down, and I see her, and I'm not kidding, this was like dead center, 4 rows from the stage, and she's waving at me. And there's an empty seat next to her. So I dashed down there, and we enjoyed a really nice play together. We never found out how she got those seats. I don't know if I want to know, but Susan was tenacious, determined, confident, and fearless. She loved making memories with family and friends. I'm grateful that Sig is making a memory book, including his journaling, and of course the memories from today with this beautiful celebration of life that he's tirelessly put on. This way we can always have memories of Susan to look back on. Sig took such good care of her. He fought hard. He tried to give the best medical care possible. He had the hardest job ever, being the caregiver. In the end, he honored her wishes of how she wanted to pass. Susan, I will miss you, but I will always remember you. I love you. P.S. Sadie is in good hands.
Thank you so much, Nancy. I would like to welcome up Jay Schmulowitz, and I'll let him explain how their relationship emerged more than 15 years after their first connection, which Fran alluded to earlier. Welcome, Jay.
It was the summer of 1958. Susan Martin, before she became Cohen, was 18 and had recently graduated near Utrecht High School in Brooklyn. Susan was going on a double date with some people she knew from her Borough Park neighborhood. There was Shelley Abelson, whose parents owned a kosher deli a few blocks away. Shelley's newlywed husband, Mel Sender, and along with Mel was his next-door neighbor and best man at his wedding, Mel Greenberg, who had recently completed a tour of duty with the Navy. There was some chemistry between Susan and Mel Greenberg, chemistry that resulted in Susan's pregnancy with me. Susan told her parents, Jack and Rose, who immediately threw her out of their home. Now, I don't mean any disrespect to Jack and Rose. I didn't know them, I never met them. Maybe they had a different view of the world, I don't know. And Susan reconnected with them later on, but that's another story. And Susan and Mel decided to elope on August 2nd, 1958. But they were young, really didn't know each other very well, and the marriage quickly fell apart. My mom was now 18, pregnant, on her own with no place to go. Although she did tell me she briefly stayed with a friend of hers in Greenwich Village for a brief period of time. She then talked to her gynecologist. Her gynecologist talked to a Brooklyn obstetrician, Dr. Elmer Gergley. Gergley had been looking after a couple Rosenthal Schmulowitz, who for 10 years went through enormous heartache with 7 miscarriages and 2 stillborns and desperately wanted a child. It was Dr. Gergely who handled my adoption privately. All the records were kept sealed. What I didn't know until a couple of years ago was that Rosenthal Schmulowitz paid for my mom to stay at a residential hotel for several months until she gave birth to me. And yet they never met or knew each other's names. My mom gave birth to me on March 12, 1959, at Mount Sinai Hospital on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. The nurses then wrapped me up and handed me off like a football to my Uncle Hy, waiting in a car outside. I drove to another apartment in Midtown where my adopted parents were waiting, along with my dad's other brother and the 3 brothers and their wives in a caravan of 3 cars headed back to Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. I didn't start looking for my birth parents until I was 37. Little did I know it would take me another 22 years of hitting constant dead ends, wrong leads, and one very misguided theory that my birth parents were very Orthodox Hasidim. I also found out later that Dr. Gergely passed away in 1973, and all of his records were destroyed. Then, in October 2018, with the help of results from DNA samples sent years before to 23andMe, Ancestry.com, connecting with Erica Cohen online on my birth mom's side, Daniel Castorina online on my birth father's side, and Risa Cohen's help in finding an obituary, I was able to find out who everyone was in just 9 days. It has been and still continues to be an incredible experience getting to know these 2 birth families over these past 5 years. I feel incredibly blessed that everyone has welcomed me with open arms. It's been nothing short of a miracle. I only wish my mom would have lived a much longer, healthier life, that we could have spent more time getting to know each other. Only a few days after I found out who everyone was, I did FaceTime with my mom for the first time, and the first thing she said to me was, "You found me." We talked for quite a bit more. Then 2 nights later, she called me at 4 in the morning and said, "I didn't need to wake you, I couldn't sleep." I said, "I'm awake, I can't sleep either." She said, "This is so exciting. I'm still trying to process all this. I just don't know how I'm going to explain you to all of my friends." I said, "Just tell them the truth." It's funny, she was like a little kid in a candy store. I just would like to conclude this with one last comment about the special relationship I had with my mom. One of the first conversations I ever had with Susan was that she seemed a little bit hesitant or uneasy about me calling her mom. I told her I was brought up by a very caring, loving family, and even though you didn't raise me, you conceived me, you created me, I have half of your DNA. I spent 9 months in your womb. You gave birth to me. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't exist. I hold no grudges or regrets. And I don't want you to feel any guilt about giving me up for adoption, because I completely understand and sympathize what you went through when you were 18 and had no place to go. I think that gives me the right, as your son, to tell you I love you as my mom. She agreed, and I could tell she was starting to cry. Every conversation after that, I would always end it by saying, "I love you, Mom." And she would always respond, "I love you too."
Jay, thank you so much. I'd now like to invite up Judy Epterling and Lynn Henderson, Sig's first cousins, sisters who traveled here from Orlando and who have always had a loving relationship with Susan, to read a prayer known in our community as the Shekhinah prayer. This is a prayer that Susan always delivered herself every single year on the high holidays, and she made her own edit, which you can see on the program.
Judy will wave and you'll join me on the bold face.
And then all that has divided us will merge.
This one.
Oh, yes, of course. Shekinah, the source of our life, hear our prayer and have compassion on us, for us.
Shekinah, the source of our life. Remember that we are
Shekinah, the source of our life, teach us to recognize our potential.
Shekinah, the source of our life. Guide us in the ways of justice.
Shekinah, the source of our life, teach us compassion and tzedakah.
Shekinah, the source of our life. Be with us for the sake of those who struggle for peace and justice.
Shekinah, the source of our life, turn our mourning to joy and our sadness to happiness.
Shekinah, the source of our life. Bless our land and the work of our hands.
Shekinah, the source of our life, gather your children from the four corners of the earth.
Shekinah, the source of our life. Complete the building of Jerusalem, your holy city.
Thank you. So now that we've read this prayer that Susan was so passionate about and took such ownership of, addressed to Shekinah, the feminine presence, the divine feminine, I think it's appropriate to invite up Susan's beloved children. Risa and Eric, they traveled here from the Twin Cities and San Diego, respectively. Susan was so much. But if you had to pick, I think first and foremost, we would say she's a wife and a mother.
When my grandpa died back when I was in my early 20s, my mom did something that had a big impact on me. She decided to create her own ritual. She loved to take already established practices, prayers, recipes, and modify them. Unfortunately, I don't think this had the desired effect the rabbi was going for. The night before my grandfather's funeral, my mother had all the family members write down memories of him on little pieces of paper. It could be a word, a sentence, or even a phrase. These little pieces of paper were then folded up and delivered back to my mother. Then, at the time of my grandfather's coffin, when it was being laid into the earth, my mother took all these 50 or so little pieces of paper and gave them to Eric and I. She asked us to toss them onto his grave as it descended into the earth. And at the same time, she lit the sage and proceeded to gracefully dance around the grave, waving the sage back and forth. I can't remember exactly how many times she circled his grave, but I can tell you the rabbi was super confused. This was who she was, and this is one of the ways we will celebrate her today. Today, we are going to recreate this ritual as homage to her. She had a forever burning flame. Her humor was wicked, her laugh was contagious. My mom really didn't have to try that hard to be fabulously successful. She was curious, laid back, creative, which allowed her to connect deeply with people and to make close connections. The one thing my mom had was a lot of friends. She had more friends than I could keep track of. And that was the way she was her whole life. It was easy to be my mom's friend. She was very accepting and always ready for an adventure. My mom was interested in everyone, and she was especially interested in you if you were different, offbeat, edgy, didn't fit in. She didn't care. Nothing intimidated her. She could have met the Queen of England and she would have been as cool and collect as ever. She didn't get fazed by much, and as a result, a lot of people were drawn to her. As many of you know, I am dyslexic. And because of the severity of my dyslexia, it was detected in me at a very young age. I know that it was challenging for my mom to raise a child with this kind of condition. My mother watched from a distance as I fought my way to graduate from high school. And her ability to take a step back and watch me fall, get up, fall again, over and over again, was one of the most important gifts that she could have given me. She never allowed me to use my condition as a crutch. Instead, she helped me to discover my gifts and acquire tools that I would need in order to succeed. She taught me to be resilient. She believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself. But the most important thing that my mother taught me was not to take myself too seriously. The not taking myself too seriously has been an ongoing lesson that I'm continuously working on. Sadly, her light blew out 3 years ago. 3 years ago, my mother tragically fell and she broke her hip. The day after her surgery, she had a massive stroke, and in that instance, her brightness blew out. She was there, but her flame was gone. During this time, friends came to continue loving her. And I want to thank those friends who stayed by her side and that brought her light, even when she had lost so much of her own. I want to thank her friends who didn't stop coming to her side, even after her fire had diminished. And for those of you who stayed on to the end, the very end, on behalf of my family, my deepest gratitude. And I want to thank special, dearest thank you to Rabbi Hannah, who has always been there for my mother, and so beautifully and so gorgeously celebrated her at Shabbat service on Friday night. Thank you so much, Rabbi Hannah.
Thank you so much. It's so beautiful. Aaron.
First of all, I want to thank my dad for the incredible amount of work he's done to put this on. It's been, I don't want to say every minute, but it's been his consumption from the last, I don't know how many weeks. So thank you, Dad, for all this incredible work you've done. And thank everybody else in the family and everybody else who's put this together. Dear Mom, I've been thinking and reflecting about you and the impact you've had on my life. And part of who I am today is shaped by you. You are a woman who balances her responsibility of motherhood and the duties of a diplomat's wife with your own interests and your own curiosities. You love travel and entertaining and socializing and adventure. And I remember you as a fearless mother, eager to experience all the culture, history, food, and social aspects of wherever you were, and then share them with me. I tried all your homemade cuisines, from escargot to cow's tongues and frog's legs and smoked eel. Most of your cooking was pretty good. Because of how you raised me, I have no reservations of going anywhere on this planet and tasting any type of food. You did not shelter me from the positive or the negative parts of wherever we lived, and I'm grateful for that. Mom, I enjoyed how you struggled with rules. One of countless memories was in London. I was in the backseat of the car, and you and Dad were arguing about where to park. You wanted to park illegally because we had diplomatic plates, and it was our turn to take advantage of the system, just like the many diplomats did in D.C. But Dad wasn't having any of that, and you were not happy with me. I smiled in the back seat, thinking how cool you were. I also kind of loved how when we were at a restaurant that they didn't have what you wanted on the menu, like omelets.
But you could see they had all the ingredients to make one. And then there would be this back and forth discussion with the waiter. And Dad would usually drop his head as you would not back down. Part of me enjoyed watching how you tried to get your way, which you most of the time did. You were pretty fearless. Another memory I have was in Rockville, Maryland, when I pulled into the driveway on a summer afternoon in our green Volvo station wagon. You were sitting in the carport at the end of the driveway. You said, "I've been waiting here over an hour. Where have you been? You're 14 years old. How are you able to reach the pedals?" I showed you the blocks that I attached to the gas and brake pedals in the box that I was sitting on, and you weren't that upset. I think you were maybe slightly entertained. I think part of you was pleasantly surprised that I made it home without crashing or getting pulled over. I know you always wanted me to take up ballet, and then I could share the love of theater and the arts, and you tried to encourage me over and over by telling me how many girls I would meet, and the girl-boy ratio would be heavily to my advantage. But it never happened. The freedom you gave me actually worked and made me more responsible for my own survival. You taught me through my own actions to take care of myself and love myself, and that these have been great lessons. You never took away my power. You didn't help unless I really asked. You let me struggle. You gave me the tools to have the mindset to go after whatever I wanted and not to quit. You always encouraged me to understand what it meant to be Jewish. Not so much the religious part, more the spiritual part, my roots and how to identify myself. And these teachings are deeply engraved within me. Mom, watching you and Dad always working on your marriage, seeing you with your soulmate, the incredible love affair you had. I don't know anyone's parents who were so deeply in love. So incredible. I thought of you as a very powerful person. You didn't take shit from anyone. If anyone wronged you, they knew about it. You were giving, but people didn't take advantage of you. You were adventurous in your own ways, always willing to try new things. You were a proud woman and a proud Jew, and you knew what made you happy, and you knew who you were, and you were a good role model for me. And I'm grateful you were my mom, and I will miss you, and you will forever be in my thoughts. I love you, Mom.
Eric, thank you so much. Sorry. Yeah, please.
I forgot to do this because I was so nervous, but as I mentioned to you, my mother had done that special ritual at my grandpa's funeral, and like I said, we're going to reenact it today. And we have these memory cards that are in the back, and there's two little purple boxes. And Luke is here to help anyone with that, but we're going to put this in the back of the chapel, and anyone who'd like to sign this and write a memory of my mom, we're going to keep it forever in our boxes. So.
Thanks, Risa. I'd now like to invite up Sig, Susan's beloved husband, who needs no introduction.
Well, this is going to be very extemporaneous. I want to thank all of you for coming, for sharing this moment. Susan designed this seriously. She wrote out the playlist. She wrote out the names of many of you who are here. She wrote out the name of the caterer, and it was all in an emergency book that I was looking at after she sadly passed away. We're fulfilling her wish, and I thank you for taking part in this. I want to thank my kids. You found it. This is a definition of verklempt, okay? I am a living person, verklempt, and if you don't know what it means, ask some Jewish person. Okay. I want to thank Eric and Risa and their families. who have been a bulwark for me. The story of the shofar. Okay, so I heard about, I went through a period of re-Jewishification. And one of the things was I heard about at another synagogue in DC, they were going to have a shofar training course. And I thought I'd go. And Susan said, oh, I'm going to come too. I said, sure. So I went with her and we bought a little shofar, and came time for us to try and blow it, and all I could get it. And Susan, first time on the shofar, and it came out like that. That was Susan. If I were going to write a word on that piece of paper, I would use the word Risa used to describe Susan, and that word is resilient. Let me explain. When we joined the Foreign Service, we had to go through months of training in DC before being shipped off to our post. For reasons I will not explain, we were assigned to Dhaka, which was then East Pakistan, and it's now the capital of Bangladesh. It was considered the harshest hardship post in the world. And why do I know that? Because the day after we received our assignments to go overseas, and we were told we were going to Dhaka, East Pakistan, the people in the training program we had to go through showed us a 16 millimeter film, some of you may still know what that is, made by Bell and Howell, called Adorable Diplomats. I'm serious. And guess what? The toughest overseas post, according to Bell and Howell and the Durable Diplomat, was Dhaka. And the most expensive, by the way, was Santiago, Chile. After watching this film, a couple of my colleagues came up to me and patted me on the back, and with a touch of schadenfreude said, sorry about that. Aww. We were told we would have a year of training plus Bengali language training before being shipped out. And we thought, this is a great time to have a child, right? We have a year. And so Susan duly got pregnant, and we thought, we're going to have our first kid in the United States. The day after we found out that Susan was pregnant, one of the staff came up to me and said, sorry, we're shipping you out 6 months early because we can't find a Bengali teacher in Washington. Susan took it like a trooper. She would have preferred to have Eric in the United States, but she never complained. And indeed, that's where Eric was born, in Dhaka. Susan, when we arrived in Dhaka, after spending one night in Calcutta in transit, she arrived with food poisoning and I with amoebic dysentery. Thankfully, they gave us a house with enough facilities to accommodate our respective deli belly problems. We were up all night. At that time in Dhaka, home phones were a rarity. And since we were at the bottom of the totem pole, we did not have a home phone. So when it came time that Susan went into labor, and she's in this house somewhere out in a suburb of Dhaka, she had to hail one of these three-wheeled motor rickshaws. She got in the motor rickshaw and sped off to Holy Family Hospital. I only heard about she was in labor an hour later, and then I went and kept her company while she was in labor for hours. Again, no complaints. She was resilient. And indeed, she gave birth right there in Holy Family Hospital, and Sister Luke performed the bris. She never complained. She was tough although she didn't appear that way. But nothing tested Susan's resilience like the challenge she faced almost 60 years later. Not quite, but almost, in February 2021. As Risa mentioned, in the midst of the pandemic, she fell and broke her left femur, was rushed off to GW Hospital. This is a pandemic, right? I'm at home, I can't be with her. And then 2 days later, as Risa mentioned, as she was about to start physical therapy, she had her third stroke, and that stroke whacked her. She was left with no balance, continuing dizziness, and chronic fatigue syndrome. She weathered the whole thing. She went through months and months of speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, going from doctor to doctor, trying to figure out what the heck she had. What was her condition after the stroke? In addition, she had more falls and more broken ribs and forever waits in the waiting rooms at GW and Sibley, and lastly at Howard University Hospital. She took a boatload of pills, which as far as I could see accomplished nothing. Compounding that were severe reactions to antibiotics. I won't go further on that. And then another blow. In September, we learned that she had cancer. And she had to undergo both radiation and chemotherapy. After 2 weeks of radiation, the burning and pain was such that she couldn't handle it any longer. And she said, that's it. Then she had her last fall. And at the time she had her last fall in her apartment in Southwest, she also had COVID. And she was rushed off to Howard University. And it was there she told me, after being in the hospital for a couple of days, she said she wanted to go into hospice. I couldn't disagree with her. After all that she had been through, how could I not agree with this, in effect, final wish? 2 weeks later, she passed away. Susan was my North Star, my far better half, the best part of my life, the blessing. Thank you, God, for the blessing of Susan, and I will remember her forever till the day I die. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have one more speaker, which might sound strange, someone following Sig. This is something a little bit different. I'd like to invite up Mary Naden, an Alexander Technique colleague of Susan, who succeeded her at the drama department at Catholic University after Susan's retirement, to bring us something I think much needed right now.
Yeah. Hey, that's a hard one to follow, Sig, I gotta say. But I'm here today to represent another love of Susan's life, which was her work life. She told me the story about when they were posted in London for 3 years. And she said, fine, oh, okay. But she said, oh my gosh, the training is 3 years. I better get busy. And she did. She trained to be an Alexander Technique teacher in London. Took 3 years to do it. And then they moved back here. She knew no one. And very soon she was working at Arena Stage and at Studio Theater and at Shakespeare Theater. She worked at George Mason University, and she worked at Howard University, all the theater departments, and at Catholic University, which is where I met her. As a young recent graduate, I asked her to mentor me, and she did, because that's what Susan does best. She takes people under her wing. I did follow her. She decided to retire, and I ended up teaching there, but that wasn't the end of our relationship because Susan and I would get together to do work together. But really, we did, maybe 15 minutes, and then we would tell stories and gossip. So that was great. Anyway, so what is this Alexander technique? I'm going to try to channel Susan right now. So if you are able, would you please stand? Perhaps you can feel, with all the emotion running through the room, perhaps you can take a moment to feel that the ground is supporting you under your feet. Can you actually sense that? Yeah. Can you just, for a moment, sense your own spine from your tailbone all the way up to between your ears? And just sense the length of that, the space between those two. Perhaps you notice that as you're standing here and sensing that length of your spine and the support of the ground, that your head is just balanced very delicately, very lightly on the very top of that spine, which is like somewhere between your ears. You could almost feel like as though it's a little tiny rocking chair there, and your head is a little bobbly head. It's kind of light. And then, do you notice that you're breathing? And you can sense all that length and that lightness of your head, perhaps a little ease in your neck. And you notice also that your shoulders perhaps just release away from each other just a little bit. Nothing that you have to really do. They just do, they go that way. And you're still breathing. And you sense that you are part of this space. And you sense all the people around you as part of this space. And your sensory system takes in this whole lovely gathering today as you're supported by your feet and your spine is at its length and you're in your width and your breadth and you're breathing and you're all living together with the wonderful memory of Susan Cohen.
Thank you so much. You're able, you might remain standing. One prayer that's entirely in Hebrew that Susan gave me permission to have during our gathering together is the Mourner's Cottage. These are words that have honored the dead for generations upon generations, for well over 1,000 years, better part of 2,000 years in Jewish tradition. You can find the words on the program appropriate to this being a celebration of life. The words of the Mourner's Kaddish are filled with praise, with awe, with amazement, with gratitude. And they are also in Aramaic, not Hebrew, actually. I should not have said that it's in Hebrew. It's in Aramaic, which is not a familiar language for most of us. But at the time it was written, this was like the vernacular. So imagine this is us sharing words in a language that is relaxing for us to speak, not something lofty and high up, but something like really just like easy and intimate for all of us. And not words of sadness and words of loss, but words of gratitude and appreciation with for the memories, for the relationships, and for the beauty represented in this room. It is, if you have the program in front of you, like to read with me, please do. The Mourner's Kaddish. Yitzgadal v'yitzkadash shemei Rabbah.
בעלמא דיברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי. בחייכם וביומכם ובחיי לכל בית ישראל, בעגלה ובזמן קריב, אמן. יהי שמי הבא ברך לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה. יתברך וישתבח, יתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה ויחוד. לעילה מכל מלכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, תאמירן בעלמא, ואילו, אמן. יהי שלום רבה מן שמיים, וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואילו, אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום, עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ועל כל יושבי תבל, ואילו, amen. You may be seated. One more song, one more thing to do together. A song that I know Susan would approve of because she brought it to me in this folder, but I think Sig's folder, no, it's right here. This is what she brought to me years ago, and it's got Moshkivinu written on it. So we'll sing together. You can find the words on your program. Adonai, Elohim Yisrael, Hamidei, Ba'inu, Spread the shelter of your peace over us. Guide us in wisdom, compassion, and trust. Hashivei, Adonai, Elohim Shalom. Hamidei, Ba'inu, Save us for the sake of your name. Heal us from hatred, sorrow, and pain. Hashivenu, Adonai, Elohim Shalom. Hamidei, Susan wanted a celebration. Oh, yes.
As a last gesture, could we play the shofar video?
Oh, yes, absolutely. She wants to hear the shofar video one more time. Yeah, I love that. Just a reminder, Susan wanted a celebration, so when we go downstairs, it's an opportunity for sharing stories, sharing memories, and celebrating a beautiful life. Shabbat, Susan.
You're all invited to join us downstairs at the reception. Again, thank you all for coming. This has been, I hope you will agree, a true celebration of Susan's life. Thank you. We'll all meet you downstairs.
Mary Case.
Nice
Friend
to
of
meet you,
Susan.
Mary. I'm a friend of Susan, next door neighbor.
Glad Lori shared about it. This is where I met Sig and Susan.
Yes.
Sig showed up one day with an Irish Catholic gentleman.
Skipped because when I did
Don't
Jen. Yeah, I worked out for that.
Said I think I can get first grade.
That was really nice.
No way. This is Miss Marcia.
If you're operating that camera, you should ask for union wages.
That's not likely.
Yeah. Time and a half. Steve, shalom.
Susan, I want to say I want to say the same thing.
You remember me? You don't remember me, do you? No, you don't. No, you don't.
We went and played games.
We played game? No, you don't. Okay. How'd it go?
Just see what's downstairs.
Benjamin. Benjamin.
Don't do that. Don't do that to me.
I say.
Thank you for saying
All these memories.
Yeah. He saw Eric. I can't remember when the last time I saw Eric.
Must be like 30 years since I saw Eric.